Well, good morning, everyone, and I hope that everyone is joining us, able to muster some holiday spirit. I think it's good for all of our mental health if we can try to enjoy as best we can this holiday season. And thank you all for joining us today for Tapping into Talent, the business case for diversity and inclusion. As the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, we're all about business, commerce, job creation, and we view as our purpose helping all businesses and all people thrive. And certainly this subject matter fits squarely into what we view as our purpose every day. And I thought I'd the event today by talking about the competition between cities and states who all want their economies to thrive and who all want to attract business and talented people. And we think a lot about the competitive advantage of Massachusetts. And as cities and states think about their competitive advantage, certainly, some places compete on weather, and we don't win that game. Some states compete on the lower taxes and regulation, and Massachusetts find ourselves kind of in the middle of the pack there. I don't think anyone would suggest we're the lowest cost state to do business in the United States. Some compete on natural resources, and as you all know, we import a lot of our energy. We don't have fossil fuels to tap into like other parts of the country. But what we do have and what our advantage is, if you talk to any CEO or company thinking about relocation, thinking about starting a business in an innovation economy, thinking about growth, what we have, what our competitive advantage is talent. And when you have a competitive advantage, people in business on this call know, you not only nurture that, you try to dominate in your competitive arena. So that's what we want to do. We want to nurture our talent. We want everyone to think about Boston and Massachusetts as the place you can find the best talent. And in doing so, we want to make sure that we don't leave anyone on the sidelines. That everybody who chooses to live here, whether they're native born in Massachusetts or they choose to come here, has an opportunity to succeed. So that's what this is all about. It's part of the Chamber's portfolio of economic opportunity initiatives where we aim to create access, opportunity in a systemic way for all. Now, many of you have probably heard about Pace Setters program, where we invite the business community to grow their participation with minority business suppliers and businesses owned by people of color. But today, we're focused on the workforce that really drives our economy. To make sure that our region is attracting and retaining diverse talent, we know that we have to do everything in our power to make sure that our workforce at all levels feels and sees not just diversity, but inclusion as a priority. And we know that our businesses are investing more in diversity and inclusion to be more competitive. And the reason they do that is they have higher levels of employee engagement rates and are more likely to outperform their competitors financially. We know that hiring diverse talent is not enough. It's the workplace that shapes whether people will remain and thrive, not only in your company, but here in Massachusetts. So today's event allows us to do a deep dive into innovative ways that we can make our workplaces inclusive and diverse so that we're creating a better business community. And as I say, nurture all of our talent. And if that's our competitive advantage, anyone in business, sports will tell you, you have to use that to dominate. So a couple of housekeeping issues. I want to flag that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. Please be sure to submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature, and make sure that it's on all panelists, or you can email questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's event. And I'm going to start with Samantha D Liberty, the Senior Manager of Government and Community Relations for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states for Starbucks. Samantha supports the legislative and regulatory engagement, social impact strategy and execution, community engagement, and volunteerism for Starbucks. Samantha also sits on Starbucks Public Affairs, Inclusion, and Diversity Community. Thank you for joining us today, Samantha. Next, we have Lucy Perez, Senior Partner at McKinsey Company. Lucy leads the evidence generation work within the pharmaceuticals and medical products practice, a strong industry here in Massachusetts, helping clients generate and apply research, insights, clinical data, and real-world evidence to maximize patient benefit and catalyze innovation. Lucy also co-leads the North American Hispanic Latino Network at McKinsey, a platform for consultants and Hispanic and Latino leaders to connect and build community, as well as advance their professional development. Thank you for joining us today, Lucy. I'm pleased to introduce my good friend, Michael Tamasi, President and CEO of AccuRounds. AccuRounds is a contract manufacturer dedicated to custom mechanical components and sub-assemblies used in numerous industries, including medical, aerospace, semiconductor, robotics, and emerging technology. Michael's a second-generation owner. He's been working in the family business for 35 years. He's also the chair of Business Leaders United's executive committee, leading on issues dedicated to closing the nation's skills gap by advocating for policy solutions to address worker pipeline challenges. Through this work with Business Leaders United, our chamber policy team was able to complete a recent policy report titled Missing the Mark, Exploring Equity Gaps in Our Education Systems here in Massachusetts. And I can tell you that not only do I call on Michael from time to time, but our elected leaders, governors, the governor, mayors, and other elected officials across the country often call on Michael for advice. So it's a treat to have Michael with us here today. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. And next we have our moderator, Sabrina Antoine Correia, Deputy Sales Director of Corporate Engagement. In Sabrina's role, she oversees Year Up team in Boston and Rhode Island. She leads the nation's efforts to close the opportunity divide by connecting young adults with employers in various industries. Sabrina, thank you for joining us here today. And now I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful moderator, Sabrina.
Thank you, Jim. It's such a pleasure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Antoine Correia, and as Jim stated, I am the Deputy Director of Corporate Engagement at Year Up Greater Boston and Rhode Island. For those not familiar with Year Up, we are a nonprofit organization focused on workforce development and higher education. In my role, I'm responsible for connecting talented young adults looking for opportunity to corporate employers looking for talent. I always like to start with the why behind Year Up, because as an organization, we fundamentally believe that every young adult has potential and deserves opportunity and economic justice. Because of that why, our mission is to close the opportunity divide by ensuring that young adults gain the skills, experience, and support that would empower them to reach their potential through careers and higher education. This is a bold mission, but one that is necessary and needed. You know, growing up in Dorchester and Roxbury, I attended Boston Public Schools and free enrichment programs similar to Year Up that would keep me from falling victim to systemic and institutional injustice. However, obstacles still presented itself, as they are everywhere, in our workplace, in our legal system, and in our social lives. What I've learned over the years is that removing these obstacles takes work, investment, and care. With COVID-19 pandemic disrupting life and work across the globe, We continue to grapple with the uncertainty around how long this will last and what enduring ramifications we will see across our communities. In a country already suffering from rising income inequality, it is more important than ever to endure and really to ensure that the most economically vulnerable Americans do not fall further in the months and year ahead. Which is why this conversation today is timely and crucial. We are here to discuss the importance of breaking down institutional barriers and providing pathways to diversity and inclusion at the hiring, talent development, and pipeline building stages. We have over 200 participants with us today, and I want to encourage you all to submit your questions along the way. This is truly a dialogue and a discussion. I have the honor to introduce to you all our wonderful panelists today who will share their own experiences, best practices to attract, retain, and hire diverse talent at every level of their organization. I'm going to dive right in because we have a lot to cover today. And the first question is going to be geared to all of our panelists. How do we maintain and prioritize diversity and inclusion during these times when companies are suffering the economic effects of the pandemic? And how has COVID-19 affected your company's diversity and inclusion goals? Who would like to go first?
Hi, Sabrina. I'm happy to jump in, and thank you and Boston Chamber for having us here today. It really is just such timely, time, like you said, for this really important discussion. We all recognize that COVID is, first and foremost a humanitarian crisis, but it's also put in corporate America at a crossroads. At McKinsey, we've been looking at diversity and inclusion in the workplace for quite a few years now. And one of our efforts is a collaboration that we do with Lean In, looking at women in the workplace. This is the largest look at women in corporate America of the last 6 years. And we have over 300 companies participating, more than 12 million employees accounted for in that analysis. And, there have been some silver linings when we look at, COVID in terms of seeing, this accelerated shift to remote work and addressing that need for work-life flexibility that consistently came up in prior years as, one of the things that employees were looking for. That said, in a way, the pendulum has swung too far. And when we look at what are the challenges that we're seeing right now with COVID, it is that employees were all feeling more burned out. People are working longer. There's less boundaries, between home and work. And this disproportionate impact is really affecting women the most, right? And one of the statistics that really, has stunned me is that when we look at this, we see that 1 in 4 women are at risk of exiting the workforce. And because of these challenges, and it's not one single challenge, right? For some it may be, anxiety around layoffs. For others, it's just burnout. For others, it may be mental health, caregiving for family members. But this is all contributing to an effect that we have a lot of women at risk. And when we, go a little bit deeper and take a look at which groups of women are disproportionately impacted here, we see 3 particular groups that need special attention and care. One is mothers of young children and the additional caregiving and educational responsibilities. The second one is senior women, who are seeing more pressure on them to be visible and to role model and take care of others in the organization. And the third is Black women, who disproportionately are more likely to know someone also who may be suffering from COVID. All this together really is a call to action. It's the things that we can do at an institutional level, and what are the things that we can do at an individual level, because there are things to be done, and the good news is many are doing, but we can do more, right? some of these may seem intuitive, but just to recap, what are some of the ideas that we're seeing companies, McKinsey and many others doing to help make work more sustainable, right? Resetting the norms around flexibility, being clearer about what are, for example, hours for meetings, and how do we let people turn off during the day, right? It's thinking about how we're looking at minimizing bias in the ways that we work and bringing in more unconscious bias training so that we're aware of that bias that we may have, whether it's in the way that we attract talent, how we work, and retain and advance our people. It's also communicating what are the policies that we have to support employees. What I hear from many organizations is there are many policies that they have put in place. So for example, additional COVID days to help with caregiving. But in some instances, employees are not even aware of what are those resources that they can tap into. So this emphasis on communication and over communication, there's frankly not such thing as too much communication. And these are just but a few of the things that we're seeing organizations do. I would also say at an individual level, take a look at ourselves and see, are we taking the opportunity to mentor and sponsor colleagues? It's something that we have to be much more intentional about in this virtual world. How are we taking the opportunity to speak out when we see bias, right? And how are we learning from our colleagues and understanding their experiences to be there to support them during this time? There are real challenges that we face right now, but I am inspired by the opportunity to grow, to change the way we work, to really bring flexibility in and create a better workforce environment for everyone.
Thank you, Lucy. Samantha, it looks like you want to chime in.
Yeah, Lucy brought up some really great points, and I think that building on her comments, Starbucks is in all 50 states, I'm pretty sure, considered an essential workforce and an essential business. And so a lot of the points that Lucy brought up, we have dealt with. And so a couple of things that Starbucks had to do immediately to deal with COVID, and because of our experience in China, was really lean into the health benefits that we have, but also first and foremost, put our partners, we call all of our employees partners because they all have stock in the company, but put our partners first. We closed all of our stores for a full month while we created the necessary safety protocols for all of our partners across the nation, and all of our partners received full pay during that time. But we've also, to Lucy's point, had to lean in to a lot of our benefits. Many people know that Starbucks prides itself on having best in class benefits in the retail sector. We have an independent audit to make sure that we rank top of that list as consistently as possible. But I think mental health has become a huge issue especially during the time of COVID. And so we launched a LIRA, which is the mental health benefit, where partners can receive 20 free, partners or dependents can receive 20 free mental health therapy sessions. But we've also, I think the importance of offering healthcare during this time has also been really highlighted. And our partners who work part-time or above are eligible to receive healthcare benefits. But also, childcare and flexible work situations have absolutely been at the forefront. We have spoken to each and every one of our partners to ask them, what do you need? What does your schedule need to look like so that we can do our best to work around those needs? And we also doubled, we have an emergency childcare program that offers funding to support parents if they need childcare, and we doubled that offering as well. So I think that COVID has really highlighted the need for benefits for workers, especially in this essential industry.
I can just add on to those comments. And first of all, thanks to the Chamber for hosting this very important discussion, and good morning to everyone. We are an essential business, so we've been working throughout being in advanced manufacturing. Obviously, we've had to alter our work environment tremendously to maintain a safe and healthy environment. And thankfully, to this day, we have not had a COVID incident in place. But the concern around mental health, is very evident, and we're dealing with that on a daily basis. Having only 70 employees and being, I guess, the small company representative on the panel, it allows all of our team, me included, to interact on a daily basis with our entire team and check in and make sure they're, maintaining focus and being healthy and safe. A little aside, as far as our diversity and inclusion goals, we have not changed our focus at all. What we've done is pivoted to virtual. So we host throughout the year plant tours. We obviously can't do that in this COVID environment, but we've hosted both live and taped virtual tours for high school students. I actually have one this coming Monday, all the way down to fifth grade classes. So workforce development starts by trying to fill the pipeline and engage kids and young adults and get their interest in our field and any field. So, and that's working quite well as posting short videos during STEM Week and Manufacturing Month on our YouTube channel.
Thank you all. I think that was so, I think the unifying piece that you all kind of touched on was that call to action, right? And putting those things into place. We talked about the flexibility, the policies in your companies, the employee first mentality, which is super important when you think about the challenges around those mental health and making sure that there's still access, right? Mike, you just talked about creating that access virtually through ensuring that folks will have the opportunity to tour virtually. Like that is incredibly nice. But that incredible call to action also makes me think about this environment, right? With the Black Lives Matter movement happening, and what is the call to action around there? And as you all know, there has been a surge of momentum due to the urgent call for racial justice, which has led to an increase in new hires for DEI professionals. And as you all were talking, I was thinking, well, how does your company view this role and its responsibilities as it pertains to DEI, and as you talked about policies in your organization relating to the pandemic? How are the DEI professionals adding to the corporate inclusion conversation as you are ensuring that those policies are inclusive to include the women at your companies as it relates to DEI and pandemic?
I can jump in here. So Starbucks has a bit of a history with this role because in 2018, we commissioned our first independent civil rights assessment, which was spearheaded by former Attorney General Eric Holder. And so that assessment, which we actually updated this year as well, is really intended to capture, report on, and hold the company accountable on its I&D progress. So that one of the results of that assessment was actually the creation and hiring of our first Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer, Zing Shaw. In terms of what Zing's role is, of course, she heads up our I&D department, but she guides hiring, development, leadership, compensation practices across the entire company. This year, we also announced nearly 20 new I&D initiatives, which she helped to spearhead. But I think, what's really important about the Starbucks approach is that leadership is trying to be as intentional as possible to ensure that Zing is not siloed, and that the I&D work that the company is committed to is a priority for each and every partner, whether it's on the corporate side or within our stores in the retail side. And we have always operated what we call a third place policy, which means that everyone is welcome into our stores. But I think that what we have really doubled down on in our intentionality is continuing to say to partners, we empower you to be leaders in your stores, in your communities, on your teams, but to make sure that they have the resources that they need to incorporate this I&D perspective. So also out of the 2018 assessment, for example, we created, in partnership with Arizona State University, a 15-course curriculum called To Be Welcoming. It's on the Starbucks Global Academy. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's free and open to the public, and it is a coursework informed by 50 experts in I&D that helps to self-educate on implicit bias and what that looks like. So I guess in summary, the I&D role is not just one role for us, and we are trying to be as intentional and hold ourselves accountable to making sure that that approach and the knowledge that goes with the I&D work that we're doing is given and spearheaded by every single partner that we have in our company.
Thank you for sharing, Samantha. It sounds like the fabric of those courses are shared amongst all employees. And so it's really coming from not just the top, but it's streamed throughout the company, which is really nice. Lucy, did you want to add?
I mean, I have to say, I love the word that Samantha kept emphasizing, intentionality, right? Because this is about being intentional, right? And McKinsey, this is, something that we clearly believe in. We've been doing the research around the business case for diversity for, almost a decade now. We started looking at some of the data back in 2011. And what we see, I mean, Jim alluded to this at the beginning, companies that are more gender diverse and ethnically diverse outperform their peers. And what is fascinating is it's not only that they have been outperforming since we started looking at the original data set, is that increase in the outperformance, the gap has been getting larger. So it is basically like a critical imperative to think about the diversity of your team and how that helps drive more value, because you're gonna have an easier time winning the war for talent, right? It is about being able to make better business decisions, right? Greater understanding of customer insights and driving innovation, right? Creating a workforce that's more engaged, that truly has that sense of belonging. And so as you were referring to, like, what are some of the actions that, we've taken more recently in light of recent events, we've actually put out a statement with our, 10 actions, 10 big commitments around how to address racial justice. And, 10, I'm not going to talk about all 10, but some of the ones that I, get very excited about, right? For example, doubling our Black leadership and hiring of Black colleagues, right? Ensuring that everyone across the firm, more than 30,000 employees, right, are part of an anti-racism and inclusion program. We've had a global day of service dedicated to understanding racial injustice. And, it's also how we work with diverse suppliers and so forth. So it takes on many forms, but back to this work of being intentional, right? It is about being very thoughtful, understanding where we are today, being clear about our aspiration and what are the different ways that we're gonna engage to get there, recognizing that for many of these, we'll need to partner, right? That we cannot do it just on our own.
For us at AccuRounds, it's community involvement. It's getting myself, our director of HR, which is a position that you don't typically see in a 70-person company, but it's important to us and our focus. And it's spread throughout our entire company. We have people that work on our floor that are engaged in the community, such as STEM events, going to job fairs. I can point to one particular instance recently where I visited the Suffolk County Jail. Myself and our director of HR, Diane, I got to know Sheriff Tompkins. He has a peace unit there, and they're doing tremendous work with those young adults and preparing them to enter the workforce. So establishing, that never would have happened years ago here, but by engaging in the community, getting to know people, we've established these relationships. Now there's a connection. If there's an opportunity that somebody is leaving that peace unit and there's an opportunity for him to work in our environment or another environment that I may know of, we can help place that individual. So, diversity and inclusion goes in a lot of different places. And this was a very rewarding experience, and hopefully will turn into something beneficial to both of us in the near future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things that you all have all mentioned in your responses is that companies that are more diverse have better outcomes, right? That's kind of the unifying theme that I'm hearing from all three of you. And then just recently we got a question from the audience, and I want to put this out there because I think it relates to exactly that unifying theme. What strategies do you recommend to have more candidates that give a greater diversity to the candidate pool and ideas to ensure we are as inclusive as possible and continue that feeling from the first moment, connecting all the way to the person's career through your organization? So would love for some responses around that. Like, how do you get a diverse pool of candidates and ensure that the focus is on their development and they feel included while at the company in their development?
Well, I guess I'll just comment locally. I know that our local team in Boston has a really strong relationship with the Boston Pick. And so I think building on community relationships, and I'll say in New York, for example, we just had a very large hiring initiative. And we reached out to everyone from colleges to chambers of commerce to CBOs. And I think that's where that community involvement and engagement comes in. Starbucks is obviously a global brand, but part of my job is to make sure that we share with each of our communities that our stores are encouraged to volunteer hyperlocally, to get involved hyperlocally, and each of our stores is connected locally to their hyper community, whether that's a block radius, or an entire neighborhood. And so and I think that comes back to both developing and empowering your partners to be community leaders, because then so for example, the Boston Pick relationship was spearheaded by one of our district managers who oversees about 12 stores, Joshua. And he manages that relationship because he lives in Boston. I do not. I live in New York. And so without that empowerment and development, we wouldn't be able to cultivate those relationships that enable us to have a wide reach and deep connections within each of those communities. I hope that answers. It was a little all over the place, but
No, that answers it, right? You talked a lot about the community involvement and having those local pillars to ensure that that's the connection. Yeah. And I know, Mike, you had a few words to share as well.
Yeah, just to take off on that, our largest source of referrals for new team members are our existing team members. So in many cases, we'll go to an immigrant and find out in their community if there are any people that are interested in manufacturing. And they'll recruit in, and they're not going to recruit somebody in that hopefully that's a good filter for us, right? They're going to recruit somebody and they're pre-filtered in, and they've continued to help grow our immigrant community that works here.
And Michael, that builds on the importance of making sure that we're caring for our partners and that they have a good working experience. Personally, so I just, for example, developed and submitted my own professional development goals. And that's a separate and apart from my work goals, but what am I going to work on as a professional in this company? And everybody does that. Every partner does that. We all share that experience. And so I think being committed to those development goals, and that's why we have, learning tools like the Starbucks Global Academy, as well as internal tools. But if our partners have a good experience, they will recommend working at Starbucks. And so that's certainly our ultimate goal. You can't get a better recommendation than that.
Absolutely. And I want to build on that, right? Because Samantha, you talked about having these local partnerships such as the PIC. And Mike, you talked about being able to go into the jails and kind of expand your connections with community in that way. And it's making me wonder, like, how important are community partnerships and how can they be the most effective as people are thinking about diversifying their pipeline?
And maybe just a few thoughts to share, right? I think it becomes really important, first and foremost, because we have to diversify that talent pipeline, right? Back to what are companies doing and what do we see working well for ourselves, for our clients, is actually think about new sources of talent, right? And those partnerships can help do that, and have a better understanding also for how do we educate around the roles that we have and what are the skills and capabilities, right, that are required for success, and trying to be as clear about that to help make the right matches happen. So for us, those partnerships become very key with whether it's expanding the schools that we're working with or groups like the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers, right? Different groups that help us tap into diverse talent and really expand the diversity of our workforce.
I think it's super important. it's all about networking and making connections. And Jim mentioned Business Leaders United, and I thank the chair for being the lead chamber in the state with our efforts to expand work and skills development out of DC. And they recently published just last week, Skills for an Inclusive Economic Recovery. And it's very much focused on eliminating structural racism and skills policy. I chair that group. I encourage people to go to businessleadersunited.org and see the policy papers there. I was fortunate enough to visit the White House when President Obama served and Vice President Biden. I met with them and only 30 people in the room addressing getting long-term unemployed back to work. I was able to bring one of our team members who's the daughter of an immigrant that came here as a machinist, who is now a coordinator and is responsible for a team of people. She's grown tremendously in her career here, and she was able to tell policymakers in the White House how important it was for them to invest in workforce development, skills training at the federal level that comes back to the state level. So I think making connections and networking, and this group just isn't about advanced manufacturing, it's healthcare, it's IT, it's construction, it's industry benign, and going to our fly-ins and meeting people and networking. We have the local impact. This is a national impact, and you can even leverage some of the work you do and learn from other states and bring that back to our state.
Michael, you leaned right into my worlds there. I think that, for example, Starbucks instituted the ban the box policy, our ban the box policy, which means that we offer a job regardless. We don't screen, essentially, if you have a criminal record, and that is a policy that's been incredibly successful, and it's certainly diversified our hiring efforts, and also leans into our belief that if you want to be a leader, you truly can be a leader. And I'll just give a shout out for the Boston Chamber. Starbucks is a relatively new member of the Chamber, but in terms, I saw there was a question about what events should I attend to network and whatnot. The Chamber has been incredibly helpful in creating those connections. So I'll just give a shout out for the Chamber that if you're looking to make connections, join, because whenever I have a question of who does what in Boston and can you connect me with somebody, they are incredibly helpful. And I would say chambers have traditionally been my go-to for learning communities because they're so diverse in their membership, from private business to large business, small business, and also nonprofits and CBOs.
Thank you for sharing those resources, Samantha, for sure. As you all were talking, there were some more questions that were coming in to our chat, and I want to get it out there because I think it's important to what we're discussing, especially as we think about partnerships and thinking about, how do we diversify that pool? And are we thinking outside of the box beyond our traditional ways of thinking of hiring? And so this question is for Mike, but I also want to include both Samantha and Lucy's perspective in this because I think it's important. In Massachusetts, we emphasize the need for a college-level education. And we have many industries and job opportunities for highly educated people. But are we doing enough to support industries and employers who don't need as many people with college and advanced degrees? And are we doing enough to support young people who do not choose college?
Boy, you hit on one for me. I've been for a long time. I served for 7 years in the Governance STEM Advisory Council, 2 in the Executive Committee, and I had to make sure that the talk wasn't solely focused on degrees and degrees and degrees. College isn't for everyone, and that's just a fact, and that's okay. One of the misnomers in this country that people think that if they don't go to college, they're a failure. Now, the caveat there is learning is lifelong. You never stop learning. And I always tell the high school kids that tour here that, it's okay if you don't go to college right out of high school. Maybe you go work at a company that pays for your college degree. Maybe you go to community college. Maybe you don't need that degree, but you need learning to do your job. I will say, I think the state is doing a better job at this the last few years. I know in our industry, there's advanced manufacturing grants that got distributed to 4 mass hires across the state. They've doubled that amount of training, and that's for incumbent and pipeline training. So it could take people that have been displaced that don't have a college degree and retrain them for careers. So I am 100% behind that comment. And, we are in a state, we have a great, tremendous higher education system, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great that the kids go to college, but you got to look at the whole spectrum. You got to be able to take the blinders off and understand there's tremendous opportunity here. I have a Voc Tech student, a Black individual that went to Southeastern Voc Tech. He came here as a high school senior, had a child his first day of high school in his senior year. He's now worked here just over 10 years, and he bought a house 6 months ago. When he told me that 6 months ago, that was one of the best days of my life, because that's what it's all about. So it can happen. You can have a career, and a stable career, without going to education right out of high school.
That's exactly what we talk to our students about as well at Year Up, like I mentioned before. Having that grit, that ambition to be a lifetime learner and want to acquire those skills to make you successful really allows you to stand out. But in a lot of ways, when you're looking at job applications and you see that college degree, but you know that you are well qualified, it intimidates people to even want to apply. So as you all are thinking about, that entry into your companies, would love to hear from Samantha and Lucy about what does that mean for you all in terms of some of these entry-level roles? Should all of these entry-level roles have college degrees? And how are you supporting folks who may not have a college degree in your organization to essentially gain a degree later on and to continue their education? We'd love to hear some perspectives around that.
There we go. So I love what Mike said around being a lifetime learner, because I really do think that's at the core. I mean, right now, even before COVID, we were going through a revolution when we look at the impact of automation on so many jobs, right? And like the number of jobs that, for example, are going to be displaced as a result of automation. And what you see is, for example, like we're going to have greater need for folks with skills around technology, right? Or like social and emotional skills are going to be in much greater demand going forward. And in a way, now this is getting accelerated, right? In this shift to like the virtual engagement model. So to your question, I mean, a lot of the conversations that we have are around how do you focus on the skills, right? Like what are the skills that are needed, and what are organizations also doing to help people continue to grow in the organization, because you don't stop learning just because you now have a job. I mean, I'll tell you, like, I'm a senior partner at McKinsey, and I still spend several weeks a year, right, in training for different like skills and capabilities. So it is about different topics, right? And so having that passion for learning, taking advantage of opportunities that you may have within your own organization, or back to the point that Samantha made, right? Like events like this that help you learn, help you grow, help you connect. Because one of the critical success factors to the growth that you'll have is the network, right? Like who are your mentors or your sponsors, who's creating opportunities for you, right? So how are you connecting with others and learning as you go?
So to work at Starbucks, you do not need a college degree. We approach this in a couple of different ways. First, if you do want to attain a college degree, we offer free college tuition through our program, our partnership with Arizona State University, which has one of the leading virtual, or I should say remote learning options in the nation. And something I will share on a personal note is that I'm my family's first college graduate. My grandfather was in a union. His grandfather was in a union. Neither of my parents graduated from college, and my mother in particular is incredibly successful and accomplished. And I'll say two things. One, I'm comfortable sharing that because Starbucks encourages us to show up as our whole selves and not to hide any parts of our past. And not to kind of fake it. But two, I think that, I have met, being a relatively new partner with Starbucks, I have met people who have been with this company for 2 years to 25 years. And there are innumerable partners who I work with on the corporate level who started as baristas and worked their way up and had those opportunities. We are, again, going back to that word of intention, we are trying to be more intentional about supporting partners who want to move up in the company and stay with us. We want to retain the amazing talent that we have. And so one of the tools that we're actually implementing is a tool for partners that will enable them to see what promotional opportunities are available and to actually express their interest through that online like tech tool, and really leaning into technology to help streamline that, because we do have such a large workforce. So those are some of the things we're looking at. But I do agree. I mean, Starbucks is all about that lifelong learning approach, and we do our best to equip our partners with those opportunities, both through, we're also specifically launching a BIPOC mentorship opportunity that will link up in the first round, senior vice presidents and above, and directors, to make sure that we have that mentorship capability. So those are some new initiatives that we're focusing on. But in general, I think that approaching life with that lifelong learning lens, and as employers, really doing our best to enable our partners and employees to have those resources. That's the role, I believe, of employers, and that supports the retention goals of major companies as well.
Sabrina, you know, there's an exciting development taking place right in Boston at Madison Park. That's been an underperforming Voc school. I'm part of their Career Champions Network, headed up by Barry Bluestone, and Jay Ash is on the network, and Mary Jo Meisner, and many other people of influence that can really help move the school forward. And they're attracting funds, they're developing programs, and they're really focused on, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, because of the students that attend that school. There's been some great success stories recently, and they want to build on that. And one final comment, you know, my father came here when he was 17 and couldn't speak English. We sponsored many ESL classes, but he went to Wentworth and took classes, never took a test, because he didn't care about a degree. He just wanted to learn. He went to movies and sat there 2 and 3 times and watched the same movie to learn how to speak English. So, you know, these are things in different ways that people can continue to learn. And I just think it's interesting, the values he instilled in me that we've carried through to this company, that now employ over 200 people, and we fly 15 plus flags for different countries that we represent.
I'm touched right now just hearing you all's own personal stories, and I'm struggling right now to say I want to ask this question, but I also want to ask this question. So I'm going to combine 2 questions, because I think it's so important that we hear your personal connections to D and I work, and how that drives what you're doing in your corporations with both Samantha and Mike. I'm hearing it in your comments right now, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more. I want to know more. But I also want to know more about these tangible skills. So I'm going to combine the questions, if you all don't mind, and then you can choose how you would like to answer. Because I want to tap in on something that Lucy had stated earlier, as well as Samantha, around the skills that is needed. So Lucy, you mentioned technology, right? When we think about, okay, we moved away from the college degree, but we think about the skill sets. Technology is going to be important. Showing up as your whole selves are going to be important. It makes me think, what skills do we envision will lead the workforce in the near future, and how should candidates prepare? So that's question number 1. My second question, which really taps into who you all are, and it's also partly an audience question as well, but how do each of you champion diversity and inclusion on a personal and professional level? So that's a 2-part question. The first is about skills and what the future holds with these skills. And the second part is, why is DE&I important to you on a personal level and professionally?
I'm happy to go first and share a bit more in the spirit of the second question, and then get to the first one. But it's fascinating to me listening to Samantha and Michael, because again, when I think of my own story, there's some very common elements. First one in my family, similarly, to go to college, right? My parents don't, you know, I grew up in Puerto Rico, they don't speak English. And here I am now, you know, like the only Latina senior partner in McKinsey's US offices, right? So when I think about my journey, and I think about all the things I have to be grateful for, right? That passion for learning that my parents instill in me, right? Like similar to what I was hearing Mike describe, right? The entrepreneurship that I saw in my family, that drive, you know, to give back, right? Because when I think about why do I get so passionate about this, because of course it's the right thing to do, but it's like there's the business case for it. So I go back to the words with which we started the day, right? And so I think that, you know, within McKinsey, I love the opportunity that I have co-leading our Hispanic and Latino network. And the way we look at what we do takes on multiple angles. To the question is like, first, it's all about how do we attract talent? I mean, I know that I benefited from the folks who reached out to me when, 13 years ago, I was going through the process and just didn't know what consulting was, right? And here they were telling me, how do you explain to your grandmother what a consultant is so that she feels it's an okay job to have, right? Basic things like that, to then, more about like, who should I get to know, right? Who are the people who do the kind of work that I'm excited about? And then we start talking about how do we retain people, right? What are the things that we're doing that people feel a sense of belonging, that they grow, like that they continue to develop over time? And what are those skills, right? Like that help you be a more effective communicator, to influence, to shape discussions, right? To be a more effective problem solver. And then there's and all of this needs to help develop, continue to develop the next generation of leaders. But frankly, that's not enough. It's also about how do we give back? I mean, 1 in 3 people who will be joining the workforce in 2030 is going to be Latino. So if we don't figure out, right, like how do we bring more of those Latinos into the workforce, right, in a more effective way, thinking about the skills that they need, it's a problem for all of the US, right? Like it's not just about Latinos. It's like the road to like continued growth for the country goes through all of our communities, right? It needs to be an inclusive economy. And so some of the things that within the Hispanic Latino network, we're been very excited because they help us build community within McKinsey, but also have an impact externally, is shining a light on some of these topics with the research that we do, for example, on the impact of COVID, the disproportionate impact it has had on Latino lives, on Black lives, right, on Asian American lives. It's also taking a look at the impact of automation on the Latino workforce, for example. And so for us, these are all opportunities to share knowledge, right, to partner with others and think about what opportunities does that create to create a better, more inclusive society.
I can pick up on that. I talked about my dad, and I was very fortunate that he lived through World War II in Italy, experienced bombings, and then comes to the United States and appreciated every minute of his life here and took full advantage of it and truly lived the American dream and taught me many life lessons, most importantly, perseverance. But he founded our company on 3 core values: teamwork, integrity, and quality. And we now have 5: gratitude, excellence, team first, initiative, and trust. And that's really the foundation and the behaviors and guiding principles behind it that are most important. We can talk about all the technical skills and training, and that's important, but I'll hire attitude over talent all day long, because if you don't have the right attitude, you're not going to survive in the workplace. So focusing on, the ability to communicate, to participate in a team. Lucy mentioned problem solving. I'll add critical thinking. Those are as important, if not more important. And we can help assist with the technical training. Our industry is going through a major transformation with robotics and automation and 3D printing, machine monitoring, big data, data analytics. We're having to relearn our jobs. It's exciting, it's scary, it's fun, it's all of it wrapped together, and that's what makes life interesting. But we're looking for people, young adults, old adults, doesn't matter. Immigrants, diversity, that anybody that's interested that has those core values can come to work at AccuRounds.
Thank you so much, you all. I know we're nearing, I wish we had more time. I'm going to be honest with you. I really do. I want to hear from all of you and all of the wonderful advice and tips that you have. I am going to close us out and say this before we leave. When we think about D&I and equity, it really requires, just what I'm hearing from the panelists, ongoing daily practices and commitment from all employees. And that's not just talking about top executives, but streaming it down to the fabric of where it lives, which is the workforce. And so as we think about incorporating those things in our action steps, is really thinking about how does the top think about D&I, how is that translated to our employees, and how is it embedded into our practices and our policies so that it is a part of the fabric of what we do. So I just want to say thank you to our panelists at this time, and I'm going to pass it on to Jim to close us out. Jim?
Okay. Well, Sabrina, as well, could listen and keep going with this discussion. It was really fantastic. And I want to thank you all for expanding the conversation. I mean, we talked about talent, but I liked when you use words about the workforce to include attitude, and Sabrina, grit. I loved when you expanded that, when employers are looking for talent, they're looking for more than just education. They're looking for a number of dimensions. And, certainly we have a lot of that here in Massachusetts. Samantha, thank you for highlighting all of the work of Starbucks. Didn't get a chance to expand on it, but the childcare policies in particular are industry leading in so many ways. And thanks for the plug on chamber events as well. Lucy, thanks for posing the question, how do we focus on the skills that you need in the workplace, not necessarily what the resume and the educational attainment looks like. And Mike, you always bring passion. When I introduced you, I said you advise governors and mayors, but I forgot about the trip to the Obama White House. You advise presidents and president-elects too. And it's just because of not only your knowledge of this subject, but also the passion that you bring to it. Two big takeaways for me. One, the topic of intentionality came up several times. I'd like to add the descriptor corporate intentionality. It's important, within our companies to think about all of these issues as we think about inclusion within the workforce and competing on talent and with our workforce. So one big takeaway. And the other is that as I began the conversation, we brag a lot about being the most educated state in the country. And our metric for that is number of college educated people and so forth. But you all have sort of, you've taken this outside the box. You've redefined that for me. This phrase lifelong learning that kept getting repeated and repeated. And it includes formal education, but it doesn't have to, right? There's other forms of ways to be a learner throughout your life and be an important element of that workforce that we compete on. So I think that maybe it's time for us to change the sort of dynamic from most educated state to a statewide culture of lifelong learners that are at the ready to service the needs of our business community, the conduct of commerce, and to enable us to achieve that purpose of success for all within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So great discussion for me, and I'm sure all of our audience. I've got a couple of reminders, and Samantha, along the lines of chamber events, this afternoon at 2:00, we have our economic overview and forecast for next year. So if your calendar allows, I'd invite you to join in and to listen to some folks tell us where the economy's going. And if they're able to actually do that accurately, I'm going to ask them a lottery ticket number as well. We have a chamber networking group on Friday, December 11th. So if you, just need the opportunity to connect in this sort of world in which we're all working from home, please join us on Friday, the 11th. And next week, take a look at our website. We're featuring Takeda Pharmaceuticals in our Women's Network event. So all of these are on our website at bostonchamber.com. Once again, Samantha, Lucy, Mike, Sabrina, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you to all of those who participated, and have a great holiday season and rest of the week. Thank you.